So Caroline, I think the screen
Yes.
that's pretty small, so you need to make that bigger. Huh?
I am fixing it now.
Am I audible, Carolina?
Yes. Yes, Abhishek.
And can you see me?
Yes.
So Caroline, I think the screen that's pretty small, so you need to make that bigger. Huh?
1 second. Fixing it now.
Am I audible,
Okay.
Carolina?
Yes. Yes, you're audible.
And can you see me?
Yes. Yes.
So Caroline, I think the screen is small, so you need to make that bigger. Huh? I think it's echoing. I think
it's okay.
is echoing back. Yeah.
No, go back. Carolina, it was okay then.
You wanted to record
second.
mode now.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Anupam. Welcome.
Hi, Anupam. Good morning. This is John.
Hi, Kamini.
Hi.
Right.
Hey, Anupam. Good morning.
He's still
Morning,
setting.
everybody.
Morning.
Morning, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Just get my notebook. 1 second.
Sure.
Hi, Abhishek. It's been a long time.
I know it has. We were just about to start your workshop before this entire fiasco happened.
Yeah, exactly. Such is life.
I think we are live now, so I think we'll just wait for
Okay. Yeah. Hi, good morning, Dr. Sanjay Jayanta. Good morning.
Hi. Hi, Anupam. Great to see you. How are
Very
you?
good. Perfect. Couldn't be better.
Sure. Okay.
That way. Good. So,
Carolina, why does it show two Abhishek Podars on my screen?
yes, it shows 2.
important people get two screens.
Not on my screen. I think you're
Not
fine.
on my screen either.
But can you all see two?
Yeah.
No, I can't
Yeah.
see.
You wanted to.
No, but it's
One image,
okay as
but
long
one-
as it's only us. I don't want. I mean, there are enough Abhishek Podars out there. One is bad enough.
That's okay. Don't worry. So we'll go live.
Kamini is so bad. She's not even saying no.
Maybe
participants are-
My
it's your
mic was
mobile
off.
phone. I think it's your mobile phone which is connected to Zoom, maybe.
No,
Yeah.
my mobile. That's what I just checked, but I don't think it is.
Uh-huh.
No,
Okay.
I've actually.
I think good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for the participants. So I can see the participant numbers increasing. So we'll wait for 2 more minutes before we start.
Sure.
And Caroline, just send me a message saying that the YouTube link is alive. Can you just send me a message if that's okay?
Okay.
Right, sure. Thanks.
YouTube
When did you
side.
think? When did you think about this, Vinod, having this conversation?
Or maybe a couple of weeks back. So, good morning, everyone who's joining. So we'll probably take 3 minutes more because I can see the participants slowly signing in. We'll just give them a couple more minutes so that they can be part of the session. So if you could just hold on and we'll start exactly at 11:05.
Sure.
So all the activities in all the museums are slowly, or rather they have wound up, no? The physical,
choice right now.
physical closures.
Yeah,
But there are some museums still open, aren't there?
I don't think
In
so.
some places.
No.
No?
In India, I'm not sure which ones are.
No, not in India, not in India.
Yeah, but
Abroad in some countries.
But in most countries, I think in Australia, nothing is open. The US too, probably nothing is open.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Some Scandinavian countries.
Maybe a small island like Vanuatu, where I guess, there's no issue they might.
But Scandinavia, they've opened again.
Germany is planning to open up some things.
Yeah.
Kamini, Carolina, thank you for organizing this.
Well, we'll get started now. Now, let me welcome everyone to this panel discussion on COVID-19 and the Indian museums. Thank you all for joining. I understand there's going to be several hundred in the audience. Some are directly connected through the Zoom platform, and some are connected through the live streamings on YouTube. So thank you all so much for taking the time and joining us. My name is Vinod Daniel. I'm going to be moderating this session. I am a board member of the International Council of Museums, and I chair the Australian Heritage Body, Heritage. I am also extremely thankful to MAP, the Museum of Art and Photography, for hosting this and for all the hard work that's gone behind to make this happen. Thanks, Abhishek, Kamini, and the whole team there. And the most important thing is I really would like to thank the panelists here. Jayanta Sengupta, who's the Secretary and Curator for the Victoria Memorial Hall. He's kindly consented to be a panelist. Abhishek Podar, who's the founder trustee for the Museum of Art and Photography in Bangalore. And Anupam Shah from CSMBS, who is so well known in the conservation circles. And the great part is, I think, between the three of them, we cover kind of the whole gamut of the museum industry, right from the public to the private sector to the collections, management, and the broader aspects. So thank you all so much. And the format, I was thinking is we'll have initially a time where I've got some questions for the panelists. So if the panelists could be quite short in their answers. So each question I ask, each panelist is going to take at the most 2 minutes to answer. And following that, so I've got 4 questions. Following that, I'm actually going to be picking some questions from the audience and put it to one or more of the panelists. So please do send your questions through whichever medium you're logged in. If it's Zoom, please type your questions. Same with YouTube. And the hard bit is going to be, we won't have time to answer all the questions, but we'll make sure we pick 5 or 6 questions from that, which would be broad and representative. Now, before I start, I think, the impact of COVID-19, I think everyone probably is well aware. They are probably going through this in some form or the other. It was very sad to hear the Metropolitan Museum alone, they lost 81 staff 2 days back. And they're looking at probably at least losing more than $100 million, this year. Now, in the midst of this, let me start with my first question to the panelists. I was just wondering how each one of you individually and your institutions managing through this lockdown period. I'm just wondering what steps you've taken to make sure both the collections and the people are safe, etc. So could each of you comment? Maybe we'll start with Abhishek, and Jayanta can follow, and then Anupam can follow after that.
Sure. I must say this has been a very unusual and also a trying time. However, we saw this coming before the lockdown was really enforced over here. And I think realizing that the welfare of our team is of utmost importance and priority for us, it was almost 12 or 13 days before the official lockdown that we met as a team and decided to start working from home. And we spent 2 days in planning how each one would have enough to do and are prepared to be able to take that step. I think this was around the 12th or the 13th of March that we took this decision. So we made sure that everybody had connectivity, everybody had enough work, and everybody understood how to do it. And we then did meet once before the lockdown to just review how it was going. So in a sense, we were quite prepared how to look after ourselves, but we never imagined that this would drag on so long, and we still don't know till when this is going to happen. This has also been one of great challenges, but also given us a lot of opportunities. Much before COVID, in fact, as back as possibly 8 or 9 months ago, we said, for every visitor who will come to the museum, we are going to have many, many more who would visit us online, because they may not be in Bangalore, or maybe being in Bangalore, they don't have the time to come. So we thought, how do we get to a position that we can have 1 million visitors to MAP even before we open?
So Abhishek, can I suggest, I'll come back to a little bit on the future. Okay. So maybe should we just move on to the next panelist? So Jayanta, just addressing that question.
Yeah, sure, Vinod. Thanks for your question. I think you also mentioned how, as individuals, we have been coping with this. And I'll just mention for myself, probably like all of you guys, I have been trying to maintain some structure in my life, just doing a little bit of exercise every day, trying to make some progress in some research projects that I have been doing, and catching up on a couple of good books and a few films that I can get hold of. As for the Victoria Memorial Hall, which is, as you probably know, India's most visited museum, it has been closed since the 15th of March. And although the office sort of reopened from 20th of April with skeletal staff, in the meantime, we have carried out periodic maintenance activities with regard to dusting and cleaning and pest control and occasional sanitization with the help of the Kolkata Municipal Corporation. And this has been done in the built-up area and also in the parts of the 57-acre gardens. And the galleries and the collections are on display and also in storage are periodically inspected by the security service, which is provided by the Central Industrial Security Force. Not every day, but at least a couple of times each week. And I had been to the museum with some of my colleagues just a couple of days ago, and fortunately things are a little bit, not spick and span, not clean, perfectly clean, but they are okay, which is a big relief for now.
Thanks, Jayanta. Anupam?
Yeah. Yes. In the first week of March, the risk assessment protocol was put into place, and the Director General, Sabyasachi Mukherjee, he chaired a meeting with all the functionaries of the institution. And the first thing we did was we sanitize the perimeter of this institution because security becomes an issue. So the entire perimeter was checked. The objects which are in the galleries, certain objects were identified which are priority items, and they were shifted to some more secure locations within the institution. An entire list of people was prepared who can stay on site. So other than the 4 or 5 senior functionaries who live on the premises, because it is interesting that certain museums, even in planning since the time of the British, there were provisions for staff to stay on the premises. So actually here you have security, the Director General, a conservator, administrator, curators, they're staying on premises. And plus, because we needed additional security and divide the time, so arrangements were also made for a working kitchen for them so that it's completely self-contained. One important thing that was done was that the climate systems were all tweaked to a higher temperature, 24 to 25 degrees. So that in case we didn't know how long, actually we didn't even know there's going to be a lockdown so long. We thought, okay, it's a couple of weeks or something like that. But the temperatures were tweaked so that in case rains come and humidity, it reaches 85–90% here pretty regularly, relative humidity. So to avoid condensation, those temperatures were tweaked higher up. Before the closure of the museum, the entire premises, all the 3 floors were removed, were completely cleaned of dust. It's like a spring clean before you go away on a transfer, on a holiday, you close everything and so those were the things that were put into place.
Thanks, Anupam. That kind of moves me, to the next question. What do you all think would be the financial impact of this crisis, both on the museum sector, in terms of the funding for museums, as well as the professionals who work in that sector? I mean, there's going to be a whole bunch of conservators, designers, a whole range of others in the private sector who would get affected. And I was just wondering, what your views are on what kind of impact, especially financial impact, would be in each one of these sectors. So maybe we'll start with Jayanta and then get Anupam and Abhishek to comment.
Sure. I mean, obviously the impact will be huge because this crisis will be a game changer financially. I guess we are, being a government museum, we are autonomous, but under the financial control of the government. So we are the privileged ones, in a sense, being a grantee institution of the government, which insulates us from some of the worst effects of the crisis. But we too are looking at the specter of very, very significantly reduced funding this year, along with the prospect of vastly reduced earnings by means of gate sales. Being the most visited museum in India, we earn quite a bit of money through our ticket sales, and nobody knows when the museum will open. And whenever it does, there will certainly be very, very, very stringent physical distancing rules in place. And in a museum where the daily footfall hits about 4,000 per day in the peak tourist season, this translates into a very, very significant difference. But obviously, I think it will be a crunch time for the smaller and private museums. I think I am not I'm not the best person to comment on this, but we all work with increasingly tighter budgets, which is far more true in case of such smaller museums that have been operating on tight budgets even before the pandemic struck. And now they are being faced with the incredibly difficult questions about how long they can afford to pay their staff before at least going into some kind of furloughing or laying off. Even such a big museum as the Metropolitan Museum, which you just referred to, I mean, their losses now have been estimated at $150 million, which was just 3-4 days ago. And there will be cut in public programming for us also. It's a scary time for everybody, but especially for the smaller local specialized museums, which I have always believed, it is these museums that bring out the vibrancy of the museum sector. So the government museums will feel the crunch, but there are some insulating factors. There is a ministry under which we operate, it will have some budget, and we will have a share of that budget. But we have to cut corners in everything from public programming to exhibitions. We are not thinking about, like many others, into acquisitions, into loan exhibitions because of the prohibitive costs of insurance and transportation. So we will look into our own collection more and more. So that is something that I would.
Thanks, Jayanta. Anupam?
In terms of financial implications, if you divide the museums, the government institutions will of course expect that the resources from the government will keep flowing to support the institutions. For the very smaller museums, they are more nimble. They have very little staff. And I think it'll also be easier for them to at least continue the core activities because they don't have that burden of too many recurring expenses that happens in larger institutions. For the institutions which are autonomous and which are run by trusts and societies, I think they are the ones who will, they are also, the advantages that they will also be able to tide over these financial implication fallouts, because I think it will make them go more imaginative and be able to generate more resources from within the area. I think it's a great opportunity for them to mobilize resources and start thinking of building up corpus. I mean, whether it's a corporate house or whether it's a family, your own family, you always have some reserves for yourself. So I suppose if you're looking at a crisis that's going to last 6 to 9 months, and if the visitors are the ones who are bringing in the essential revenue or renting out your premises for cultural functions or the rentals that you may have for other institutions, I think because this is not going to last forever. And I was just talking to a doctor also today in the morning, and a shutdown is not a solution. It is an intervening stage. And I think financially, there's also the theory of constrained resources in economics, where the moment your resources are constrained, you find that you sometimes function even better. This is not saying that this is not going to have a financial implication or that it's positive. But the thing is that I think, like human beings, I think we'll just walk across it. Yes, certain activities about outreach and other things will be pushed off to other media, which we will talk about in due course of time. But
Thanks.
financial implication, I think it'll make people think about utilizing the resources better and carrying on with their staff, because the time will pass and they are the people who are going to stay beside you.
Thanks, Anupam. Yeah. Abhishek?
Yeah, what do I say? We are not a government-funded institution. We are privately funded. Of course, it's going to have a huge impact on MAP and going forward. The advantage we had is that we are not yet open and we were still under construction. And now that construction has also been stalled, and I guess even when it does start, it may not start with a bang because we do not know if all the labor would be available and whether it happens in fits and starts and how long it takes. So I think the prudent decision was to move the opening date, though we do not know when we are going to open and we don't want to announce that just yet, because it would make much more sense to try and time it to a post-COVID era. And, a lot of those issues would get sorted out by then and the world still wants to meet people and go out. And in the event this is going to continue, take for example, for 2 years, then it's better to do a virtual museum than do a physical museum. However, saying that, fundraising is primarily what I was doing for the museum, which has really taken a hit. And, there are such bigger issues and humanitarian needs right now. And it would be unfair to take those monies for culture when it could be better spent, in spite of it directly impacting our industry. So MAP itself is trying to do its own bit for COVID, but I think we will tide over this. Like Anupam mentioned, the world will get over this and we'll bounce back. It's quite clear that when you look at how long it would take the corporate sector, it would possibly take 2 or 3 times that for the cultural sector, because it's the corporate sector that really supports this. when it's not a government-funded institution.
Thanks, Abhishek.
Just one thing, because just a corollary to this. I think it is also about being able to, if you like, you think culture will take a hit because that does not seem to be a priority. But I think this is also an opportunity for us to network culture with the other sectors and add value to them, and that is the way both of them can carry on simultaneously. It is not that leaving aside culture will do the rest of the things which are required for society or in the system. I think if you can converge them together, there'll be it's winning both ways. It can be done.
Yeah, thanks, Anupam. Just moving on, and my third question, and one of the participants has also sent a question that's very similar to this. It is so with the expectation that some of the preventive steps with regard to COVID-19 being in place for the near future. What additional measures do you think museums and professionals have to take to adhere to social distancing, hygiene, cleanliness, those kind of things? How is that going to impact? Maybe Anupam, this time you start, and then we'll move to Abhishek and Jayanta.
Well, I suppose institutions, well, in a museum, one really can't set up well, there was something that we created when we made the conservation plan for the Ajanta caves paintings. It was called the SENT system, S-E-N-T. It was a sequenced entry system. But once the people are inside, it is up to the guards and people themselves to make sure that they space themselves. You can't really keep a time for them to move on and on, It's more dynamic than that inside a museum. So I suppose people will maintain the distance themselves. And in terms of hygiene and other things, I suppose, it's the usual which people would do to prevent certain infectious disease from spreading. But one thing which I would like to point out specifically is, I think the institutions should all, it's a great opportunity to look at our climate control and air conditioning systems. We do not actually follow all the parameters which are to be required when installing systems in terms of the amount of fresh air that comes in, the types of filters that need to be there, the protocol for changing or cleaning the filters, the things that accumulate inside the ducts, because that itself is going to perpetuate the virus from spreading within the institution and to all the people in it, if it's a centralized air conditioning system. So I think that is what I would say as a prime thing to do with the other physical actions to avoid, to have hygiene and avoid other infections. It's a climate control system that we should look at a little seriously with proper protocols, which are usually not followed, especially not in our countries.
Sure. Thanks, Anupam. Abhishek?
Well, like I mentioned, I don't think we are going to have much of this problem because we are not yet a physical space. Yes, we were doing three things when it came to being physical. One was the education workshops that we were doing with kids. But I think until the kids come back to schools, they're not going to be coming to our workshops. So there we've already put a plan in place how we're going to do this. I think there is enough awareness about this that it's not just the institution, but the individual themselves know what they're supposed to be doing. And in a lot of cases, I think some of us are over-informed. And I think that paranoia, which to a large extent is also justified and in some cases unjustified, would automatically make them aware of that and maintain those distances. If the other thing that we were doing was our workshops, which were for conservation and for different things related to technology, but they were always restricted to about 15 people at a time. And there it would be fairly easy to maintain this space and this distance and hygiene. And that's what we plan to do. The other large part of audience engagement was through our talks program, which we were doing with the BIC. And I think now we've converted all that to doing that digitally and through seminars like what we're doing right now. So that's already on.
Thanks, Abhishek. Jayanta?
Yeah, I mean, the social distancing, hygiene, cleanliness, these will be a very important part of our daily lives, which is very obvious, especially those museums which have limited space but are generally crowded. Uh, but the systems will have to follow the advisories of medical experts. But at a minimum, the things that will come into play will include probably physical distancing in queuing up for tickets, more and more online ticketing, thermal scanning at the entry point, facilities for hand hygiene before the entry into museum buildings, and of course, close monitoring of visitors in all public areas with physical distancing between them. This is more easily said than done. Victoria Memorial Hall can get easily crowded. Maybe it will be a good thing for us because we have already reached a threshold of the maximum crowd, maximum population that we can take inside the halls and so on and so forth. As you have probably seen, there is a market already growing to cater to such surging demand with products like disinfection tunnels or something like that, involving the use of some sort of sanitizing mist or spray, which are yet to be certified by the health ministry and whose effectiveness we don't know. And I hear that the Defense Research and Development Organization, DRDO, is also trying to develop something like that. So it needs to be seen what comes along that can be used with benefit. But at the end of the day, museums are family-friendly spaces. Many of them have gardens. And it would be a real challenge to ensure that even family members or groups of friends, they maintain this social distance. It's a challenge at a time when the museum space, we have to reinvent the concept of museum space. Abhishek talked briefly about digital technologies. Maybe we can have more of that later. But the museum space can be, or it is by nature, a healing space. It can be a healing space and an elevative space. So that's going to be most challenging. Something that is going to be challenging is to prevent the taking of group fees, for example, inside the galleries, because that always flies in the face of physical distancing and so on and so forth. So for the time being, we have to develop these and maintain these protocols. But as both of my other co-panelists said, the public have to behave in a very, very responsible way. They have to know what they are doing about it, what the risks are.
Thanks, Jayanta. And, I think that kind of addresses one of the questions from the audience too. The next question I have is, again, we'll start with Abhishek on this. What do you think would be the long-term impact of this crisis on Indian museums? For example, do you think there would be more efforts going forward on digital online experience compared to physical visits? And as part of the question is, how do you monetize that too? Because right now you have a formula for monetizing visitors coming in, gate takings, people buying from shops, a whole range of those kind of things. So maybe if each one of the panelists could
Sure. So I think there's a great opportunity here, Vinod. And like I was mentioning even earlier, that today with the consumption that people would like to do for even art-related stuff in just these last 5 weeks that we've seen, there's been such a plethora that every museum, every gallery is trying to put out stuff digitally and online. Of course, there's a huge debate as to how much of that we can consume and also relating to the quality of what is coming out. But we very well knew that even though you have a physical space, if you're not in that city, the only way you can visit it is visiting it online. And I think that's going to happen a lot more. But human contact is something so important that the moment things are fine, I think people will want to get back to that. When we say it's a new normal, I doubt that the world would ever be a new normal where we are not interacting with one another or we are only doing it through an interface like this. So I think, yes, during this period, how do we do it is the main point over here. When you talk about how do you monetize this, if you really look at the cost of entry to some of our museums, I mean, the one in Bangalore has a 2 rupee entrance ticket. I possibly would imagine that it may be costing them more than 2 rupees to take a ticket of 2 rupees. So it could be an opportunity that what people were going to buy from your gift shop, they would buy that online. And unless we are pushed to this, we don't even innovate. So I think the amount of innovation we would see here would be unprecedented. And when you look at technology, it's kept on becoming better and becoming more close to what the real experience is. But I think there's still a gap between actually going and sitting in an opera versus hearing it with your speakers at home. And I think the same holds true for art. When you're standing in front of a masterpiece or looking at an object in real life, it's quite different from just seeing it on a computer screen. So I think until we can make it as close to that, I think we still have a space here.
Thanks, Abhishek. Now, before Jayanta speaks on this, can I ask the audience to send more questions? I probably have 6 or 7 questions already, but please do send it either through the Zoom chat or through the relevant YouTube link. Yeah, thanks, Jayanta. Go ahead.
Oh, right. Yeah. Sure. I think I completely agree with Abhishek, and I would say, and this is something that I think everybody would agree upon, that it's a challenge, but it's also very, very interesting for us to use this adversity as a kind of opportunity. It's an opportunity thrust upon us, and it's a defining moment. But there is no question that we, along with all over the world, would now need to reinvent ourselves digitally, creating new content, finding new ways to present it to the public, and engaging with online visitors in engaging ways. It's very, very important now at a time when the museums are closed, people are at home, we are lonely, people are lonely. So it's very, very important to maintain a connect between the people and us, because everybody needs their cultural thing or a cultural fix, if you will. So it's very, very important to maintain a constant conversation with the community at large to show that we are there. We are in conversation with you. And so that kind of a dialogue is very important to remember. I mean, it's obviously difficult to substitute a live and in-person experience, but it makes sense of us to think of this as an opportunity to explore new frontiers, to try and find ways of digital curation and engagement, which is an opportunity because it also makes it possible for you to go beyond the limits of the finite nature of the physical object. More in-picture curation, more layered narratives, some digital intertextuality or something like that, something on the lines of a history of the world in 100 objects. So you take a more in-depth look at your object, which digital technology makes it possible. And in order to do that, I think we will all sort of, it's a bad time for museum staff. People are getting furloughed, laid off. Many contractual staff are being laid off. But it's also a time to engage with more and more people out there who develop, technologies like AR or virtual reality or digital humanity. So it's also an opportunity to go beyond our usual comfort zone and try to have these digital conversation and engagement strategies which are out there in this world. And it's an advantage that there are these institutions like Google who are supporting us, who we collaborate with in a major way. But this is going to be the roadmap for the future. That's for sure.
Thanks, Jayanta. Anupam?
Yeah, I think in terms of your question as to the long-term implications of something like this, one, as I said, is people will start looking at building up their financial reserves and human resource reserves also for situations. The next thing that they would do more in a shorter term would be they would be reassigning tasks to the existing staff, right? Because everybody is not a hands-on person. There are many people who might be staying at home, but they may not be able to contribute to the museum because their work is actually manual, right? So that reassignment of tasks will happen. It is happening. The other thing I think that institutions will look at, you have this thing called the business interruption insurance, something like that. So I think it's institutions like museums I think new insurance systems might come into place also for situations like this. The thing that happened with this pandemic was there was no precedence, whether for the medical fraternity or others, other than the real ones, the ones that happened earlier with the Spanish flu and all, but this is too much back in time. So everybody is now getting around to it. They're getting the hang of it. And I think people are rallying now and they're able to catch the things by, whichever part they want to hold it. The other thing, this thing that you mentioned about in terms of the implications in the digital world, the network of European Museums Organization has launched a huge survey which has been extended till April 30. Till April 3rd, 650 museums were interviewed and surveyed. And there was a 20 to 500% increase in digital presence. It was huge. So the fact is that these systems were always there. I think what this is doing is it is going to accelerate the projects that have been pending. It is going to accelerate the hiring of the resource persons who will create the digital platform for you to work on. The outreach and the design and infrastructure that is to be developed. So this would happen, which would have happened a bit slower. I think it has been like a catalyst for it and given a fillip to this effort. So digitally, I think this has always been there, but it's just that it'll catch on a little more. And eventually, people will come back together. The museums will still run the way they were running just now, at least in terms of the bonhomie, the people that are going to be there, the crowds, and everything. The physical presence will always be there, and you cannot beat that physical presence with the objects. And it's great that the digital world will complement that experience and enrich it. So again, it's a good situation.
Thanks, Anupam. So what I'll do now is just move on to questions from the audience. And there's a lot of questions that are coming in. And I'm going to actually put some of the questions together so that we answer, different aspects of their question, just in one go.
Yeah.
So one question is all to do with reserve collections. Most of your institutions have collections in storage. So combining a few of the questions, people want to know, what are you doing with those reserve collections during this lockdown? How did you decide what needs to be done for the collections, more in terms of risk assessment or whatever it is? The other one is, in future, what lessons have you learned? So in case there's one more lockdown that's going to come in future, what are lessons you've learned now that you would recommend we do in future for reserve collections? So maybe who wants to
I'll
start
just say a
that?
few things and then.
Sure,
yeah.
go ahead, Anupam.
Yeah.
Anupam, your voice is a bit low. Can I suggest that you speak a bit
Okay.
louder?
All right. I'll just put this closer to my mouth. Yeah. As I mentioned, one thing which stood us in very good stead was the fact that there are provisions for staffs to stay on site in case of an emergency like this. So this is a good thing that one could consider, basic systems to live within the premises of the institution or to place someone in times of a crisis. The other thing is that we have, even now, in fact, I'm sitting in the lab because today it's my duty to do the rounds. So we have daily inspection of the collection, basically, daily. Of course, it's sequenced. So you have 3-4 galleries a day, and then you slowly, by the time you finish, it's a week by the time you inspect the entire collection. At the same time, we check the climate control settings whenever we get a chance, every 3 days, every 2 days, with different galleries as you go around them. The reserve collection is what is also known as the storage. So they've come under the same protocol of inspection. Physical inspection, I think, is a definite yes, and you cannot do without it. Nothing beats physical inspection. And that is something one has to just make provisions for. That's what we are doing.
Thanks, Anupam. And anybody else wants to chip in?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very important question. It's a critically important question because at least in most of the larger museums, the vast majority of their collections are in storage in any case. In Victoria Memorial, almost 80% of the collection is in storage. In the Indian Museum in Kolkata, more than 90% of the material is in storage. So it's hugely important. What we have done in the Victoria Memorial is that we also have the advantage of having space on campus for essential personnel. The security personnel of the Central Industrial Security Force are there. Our own facilities maintenance staff are there. So what we have done is with the coordination of our security officer, we have done a weekly, not more, we wish we could be more regular than that, but we had done a weekly inspection of the storage and gallery areas by a team led by the security officer, a conservator, and a curatorial staff. So that's what we have done, and we have tweaked it. I mean, we have not. We have for our works on paper and textiles, we have monitored the climate control systems which have been newly installed during our modernization, and we have checked the readings once per week, and we have done that. But this is one major question which is going to be very, very critical, and therefore, as Anupam said, one has to put these protocols in place so that if there is another lockdown at some point, just like we have to be prepared for any disaster, we have to be prepared to put in place protocols that will make it possible for us to be away, if necessary, from our collections for extended periods of time. That's hugely important.
Before you move to Abhishek.
Thanks, Jayanta. And Abhishek, do you want to add anything before we get done?
Well, right now the entire collection is in reserve because we don't have anything on display. So I think Jayanta and Anupam have already answered what we should be doing. Yeah, so I'll pass on this. Anupam, you were saying something for me?
Yeah, just one little thing was when this inspection happens, the most crucial and the most the winning system that we have here is that the curator, because one must remember that the staff which, there's something called, the staff which has been in an institution for many years. Yes. And these are the persons who are the most invaluable at this time because they know the institution intimately. They know where the leakages are, for example. They will know exactly which is susceptible to insect attack. They will know exactly where is it that just in case there's microbiological growth, there's a lot of that in these tropical countries. So, and these are the ones who, when we are doing the inspection, the line is on with them. It's a telephone, basically, right? And that you'll be surprised how important that guidance has been from the curators of this institution, Manisha, Vandana, and all these people, because they are the ones who guide you as to let's do that gallery. Let's skip that round just now. I think we should do that section before. And believe me, it has been invaluable, that little bit of guidance, because they know the place intimately. And we must never discount these elderly and old staff of institutions which know the place intimately. And compared to, maybe
thanks, Anupam. Yeah,
cool young guys. Yeah.
Thanks, Anupam. Now the next, a couple of questions again I'm combining. So this one's a much more broader question. So I think everyone's going through a very difficult phase. There's going to be a lot of healing, a lot of other broader aspects that need to be done. And also, I guess the discussions on climate change and others are coming up, saying, look, what could we do? Now, as museums, what role do we have in this aspect? I mean, I'll leave it open-ended to anyone to answer, in terms of, this whole part where, the country is just going to, come out of this, and there's going to be a period where there's a lot of assistance that's needed. in various spheres?
Yeah, if I think yes. I mean, we have to. Climate change is only one aspect of the whole question of the Anthropocene, which is the age that we are living in. So this is not going to be the last of it. We are going to see more of it. Of course, I think there are museums like the National Council of Science Museums, which in the recent past did a major exhibition called Superbugs, which was this was before COVID-19, but it was a very topical and a very relevant exhibition. All exhibitions cannot do that, but I think something that we can probably do in these times is to, and this is just, I'm just thinking aloud, is instead of these grand blockbuster shows that that are in our wish list usually, we can probably plan exhibitions focusing more and more on local communities, on connections, local communities, local histories, and so on and so forth, so that we can do exhibitions, curating them in a way which can bring out some basic values like collaboration, cooperation, friendship, inclusivity, and so on and so forth. We cannot always, all of us cannot plan exhibitions or shows that can be directly relevant to problems like climate change or Anthropocene, but we need various kinds of tools and resources, many of them emotional, in order to cope with such situations, and more of this kind which will surely come along. And therefore, I think in our broad programming, we would probably try to do do things that will emphasize more on inclusivity, on friendship, collaboration, and things like that. I don't know if that answers the question, but we have to prepare in any case for climate change and more such aspects of the Anthropocene.
Thanks.
May I go next?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Abhishek.
See, art has always been a huge medium through which a lot of these discussions have happened. And in history, if one looks at it, in many cases, it was really the first medium that expressed this. And artists are free thinkers, and various topics, before they become mainstream, they're expressed through art. And I definitely feel the museums have a role to play in that. Whether every exhibition addresses those issues or not, as Jayanta said, is correct. We may not even have collections which are relevant to the issues that we want to do. But that's what debate and curation and getting people together to create new art is all about. And I think it's going to be no different in the museum sector. And I think we all have a responsibility to address some of these issues, and especially the issues which is not on everybody's mind, but are minority issues as well.
Thanks, Abhishek. Maybe I'll just move to the next question so that we can cover more questions. Everyone's talking about phased openings, right? Now, if they say museums need to have a phased opening where some aspects need to be opened first, some next, some maybe a bit later, what would it look like? So maybe we'll start with Jayanta and then, move on.
That's a tough one. It's a tough one, but I think in terms of the seasons of the year, once the monsoons are over, once the wet season is over, we usually do most of our public programs, whether it's talks or performances or concerts, in an open air space, on the terrace, on the sides of the terrace of the Victoria Memorial Building. And those open air programs are very, very popular, and they're not in a confined, closed space. So given an opportunity, we would like to open the museum with those kinds of programs in an open space, which are visually very attractive, as well as relatively, I would say, safer than operating within the confines of a building. Once, after that, probably we would open up our newly renovated galleries, because they are all housed uh, in galleries that have very, very high ceilings. There is much ventilation, natural ventilation around. So that is also possibly safer, relatively safer shows for people to enjoy. So that's about what comes to my mind. Just immediately.
Just,
Anupam, anything from?
yeah, just a few thoughts that came up as you
Anupam,
were
just your
talking.
microphone. If you can just hold on your microphone.
Yes. One or two things came up as you were talking. If you're looking at staff being an issue, the amount of people who are going to man the place, because they are the ones who are going to control and they're the ones who are going to interact with the visitors. I think it may be possible, if you're looking at a phased opening, you may not be able to open out the entire museum if it is big. One may have to realign objects in 1 or 2 or 3 key galleries to give a representative feel of the various, the range of objects and the era that they represent. That is one for the visitors. In terms of the activities of the institution, activities like inventorization, this is a great opportunity for institutions to look at the entire reserves collection, everything, and do an inventory of the systems. Involve RFID in it or do things like that. But I think phased openings will be not just for the visitors, but phased opening also in terms of the activities of the institution. So your core activities, and this happened for India at a time when this financial year was ending. So this March, April time, in fact, most of the people who are involved with accounts and administration, including here at the CSMBS, these people have been, I think, never been more busy in their life than they have been at this time because of the truncated support staff. So I think the phased openings can be in terms of activities which can be done. And for visitors, I think you may have to realign your displays and other things. Yeah. Whereas your phasing for your digital outreach will also be, in fact, it's happening now. So this is a good time to take opportunity and get those systems in place, which have really been neglected when an institution is running. People leave alone these things. This is a great time for institutions to get it all together. It is.
Abhishek, you want to add anything?
Yeah, so as far as MAP is concerned, our education, as well as our public talks and stuff, we are already doing. I think we would start with our workshops, which would be small numbers. And we don't have the problem of a physical space just yet. And since we are looking at postponing this to the post-COVID opening, I don't think we would have much of a problem there.
Thanks, Abhishek. Maybe I'll take 1 or 2 more questions just based on time. We got 7 or 8 minutes left. So this is to do with museum staff. See, visitors to museum come from all parts of the world, all parts of the country. So health and safety for the staff is an important aspect. And what do you think should be the key steps to make sure the staff are safe? Maybe again, say Abhishek or Jayanta, you want to start with, and then.
So, of course, I think our staff are as important, if not more important, than anybody we are serving, because it's they who are at the front line and make the institution what it is. So what we did, at least in this case, is not only did we look at going and working from home much before, but we also encouraged those who were not from Bangalore to go back home, because we did anticipate that this would be, at that time, it looked like it's going to be about a month long, but who knows how many months it's going to be. And some of them took advantage of that and are actually in their own homes in different parts of the country. Going forward, I think even after we open and the office is running, we are still going to try and minimize the coming into work as far as possible, maybe with the exception of the conservation team, because they would physically need to be with objects and work with that, which they can't do at home because they need a lab setup. But it's not going to be 50%. I think it's going to be at best 20%, and that also would be staggered as and when they really need to come in. So that is paramount, and there's no compromise on that whatsoever.
Yeah, I think I have not much more to add. Nothing really new. I would say that, yeah, we are in any case, we are now operating with hugely scaled down staff, and we will be, you know, when we are looking at a phased opening, we will of course make various kinds of classifications. I mean, we already know who are more vulnerable to you know, falling ill, and who are the fitter of the staff, and so on and so forth. So we will maintain those same protocols, but perhaps this is also a moment to put into place you know, some guidelines, or a culture of physical fitness, a culture of maintaining your health and hygiene, which government employees usually don't do, because they are covered by you know, treatment insurance and packages, the central industrial, the central government health service, and so on and so forth. But I think it's a moment for all of us to put in place a regime where everybody works on prevention rather than cure, and that can be done through. That can be done through orientations, even some awards, and so on and so forth. That's all I have to add.
I have one more thing to add here. In MAP's case, we have a very young team. I think our average age would be 30 or 31. So in that sense, I guess they're a lot more fit, and they're younger and resilient. Plus, being a younger team, they're also much more tech savvy and digitally oriented. And I think the digital component of MAP is already put out certain things that we hadn't anticipated to put out right now, two of which is the Bouquet of Hope as well as the Homebound series. And I think they're both gaining a fair amount of traction. And we look at doing a lot more in terms of education and engagement with our audience right away.
Anupam, any other comments?
Yeah, just some quick points because of time. I think in terms of this institution at the CSMVS, the education department is probably one of its strongest departments, and they are going ahead, you know, with elan in terms of their activities, and they will of course upscale it even more. And this is being done off the premises, right? In terms of other core activities, I think the core activities will then be also planned almost on a project basis, where the projects are really short. We're talking about a few days, you know, and a weeks. Once these core activities which require some physical presence are done only by those selected people who need to come in with all due precautions, I think what the institution will probably do is they'll appoint coordinators for every type of break down the activities, because working from home, no matter how sincere anyone is, it's not easy. Working from home has its completely, you know, it has its own dynamics, and it is, so you need someone to be with you, almost like a hand holding. It's not a monitoring, but I think these coordinators are very, very crucial, with a group of 3-4 people only. And so these little teams can then, and someone has to see whether it's happening. Because initially when you start working from home, there's great enthusiasm, and there was, and a lot of online meetings happened, this happened, but the follow-up of those meetings petered out with time. So if you're looking at another 2.5 months of this, I think it's time to appoint the coordinators with 2-3 people to network here and push the work ahead and get the results.
Thank you, Anupam. I think we are nearly there at the end of the discussion. Just a few closing comments. You know, the Hindustan Times wanted me to write a small opinion piece, which I shared with them. It came out yesterday, in which I did mention, I think one of the things with the museum sector more broadly, globally, including in India, is I don't think we are, you know, as quick in changing. And maybe this particular thing is going to be a great opportunity for us to really rethink, you know, go back and say, look, what we've done has been great, but as we go forward, what are other things we can do that would make it even greater. Say, for example, this whole thing on online, there have been tried and tested models where institutions have probably increased their audiences 25, 30 times using a combination of physical visitors and online visitors. And also there's been a bit of research that shows that just because people come online doesn't mean they'll stop coming to the museum. If there's an opportunity, what they see digitally, they might want to come and see what the real thing looks like too. So there's a whole bunch of knowledge in that area, and what we can do in building that up would be great. For India, I think it's a great opportunity because in terms of IT, in terms of what's available, we are at the forefront. I think any sector of business we go to, they all come to India for it. So maybe this is the time for the museum sector to probably go and leverage that expertise. And I think we might come out right at the top, within the museum profession globally, if we get this right. So thank you again to all the panelists. I think it's been great. Thanks to all the participants, everybody who logged in, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinod.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Thanks
You
for
too.
the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thanks to all the people who are seeing this.
Bye.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks. And
Likewise. Thank you.
All right.
we'll just disconnect now. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
This is